Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Thursday evening Parent Academy webinar session. Thank you for joining. And again, we're excited to have you as audience listeners and participants. I am Tina Folston Hayes, the Parent Academy Specialist for Educational Equity and Outreach for Alachua County Public Schools, and I want to welcome you this evening. Tonight, we will receive some helpful information from our guest speaker, Ms. Tamara Olborn, on the subject of self-harm. Just before we begin, we would like to go over a few housekeeping elements. Please keep your microphones on mute through the duration of the presentation, and we will be monitoring your questions, and we will respond accordingly. Please use the Q&A feature located at the bottom of the webinar window, and please note that all Parent Academy webinars are closed captioned, recorded, and posted on our website for access at a later date or re-review for any individuals who could not tune in live tonight. Your questions will be answered at the conclusion of each session. If there is any specific need that you have for a personal conversation, our Parent Academy email address is parentacademy@gm.sbac.edu. And we will get to those questions or your requests for additional information forwarded to the proper Alachua County Public School official or team member. And again, I would like to present to you our guest speaker for this evening, Ms. Tamara Olborn from the Cook Center. Good evening.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I am so happy to be here with you guys tonight. Tina, will you just give me 2 thumbs up? My screen share is working. 2 thumbs up. Okay, perfect. I'll just have to double check my technology. This is tricky. Okay, so tonight we are excited to talk to you about why children self-harm and how parents can help. We know that this is really it can be a heavy and hard topic, and it's something that I know we worry about as parents, and we do know this is something that's kind of increasing in what we're seeing in youth across the country, really. So we want to take the time today and really help answer your questions, give you some confidence, and know how to handle some of these type things. If you are on your computer, you can join us on the Mentimeter. So if you go to menti.com and you enter this code, you'll have a little thing show up on your phone. I could show you, but I'm not logged in because I'm teaching, but that way you can participate with us. So there'll be some questions, you can answer them in the Mentimeter. There's also even a Q&A enabled, but you can also, again, drop your questions into the webinar, and Tina will help make sure that I see those and we can get those answered to the best of our ability tonight. So once you're in, if you're in Menti and you want to just hit the little heart like button, I can know you're there. If no one participates that way, that's okay too. Oh, good, we have some. It's my favorite. I wish that I could see your faces. I wish that we could be interacting. And so for a webinar platform, it's my very favorite that you can interact with me a little bit this way. So I appreciate you logging on. Okay, so I've been doing prevention work for quite a few years. I started in suicide prevention. I'm now the prevention coordinator of my city, and I work with different school districts and areas across the country. And I know that self-harm and suicide kind of have close ties, and we're going to kind of separate those out today and talk about what it is that parents can do and what we need to learn. So very first question, this is sort of a let's practice using our Mentimeter. Are you new to the Parent Guidance Series? Is this the first session that you've attended? Oh, we have a newbie. I love it. I know that you've been offered these, but I'm really glad you're here. I think it's a great way to learn, whether you're here live or whether you're watching later. I know that this information is really important and good for our kids. Okay, here's the next question for your Mentimeter. What age are your children? I know that some people come to these for their own kids. Some come because of students. You know, and for me, My kids have friends that I'm also sort of watching out for, just like I'm hoping other adults are watching out for my kids. So it looks like we've got high school, elementary, middle school, the whole range represented by parents. And even our adult children might struggle with this, right? Anyone can struggle with something like this. So just know that you can apply what we learned today to anyone in our life when it comes to self-harm and what we can do to help. Okay, one more question here for the Mentimeter before we get started. What do you feel like you know about self-harm? What's your gauge on your experience with self-harm? Is it, you have a child that's self-harming, or that you know someone that is? Sometimes people have only heard of it, right? Like, we know it's out there, but is it something we're experiencing? And then also we have people that, it's really unfamiliar. Maybe they've seen it. I don't think anyone's not heard about it at this point, but okay. So some of us here tonight have kids who are self-harming and are, I'm sure, looking for answers. And then there's some of us that have only heard of it. We know statistically that most of us as adults will either know a child that self-harms, whether it's our own child or a child's friend or someone in our sphere of influence, because it is becoming increasingly, it is happening at an increasing rate throughout our youth. So excited to get started and talk about this with you. So 15% of teens this is reported, some form of self-injury. So knowing that we will probably be in a situation where someone we know is self-harming, we want to be a safe adult. We want to be open to talking about it. We want to be able to help that person alleviate their pain and get to the resources they need. So today we're going to work on being educated about warning signs and what to do and what to say. One more question. Please share a few things of what you're hoping to learn tonight. We are going to talk about a bunch of different things, but if there's some way we need to kind of push the direction or an outside resource that I can show you at the end of this presentation, I would love to do that for you. A little bit about me while you're thinking about that is I have 4 kids. I have 2 teens, 2 teenage girls really close in age, and then 2 elementary school level kids. And so I know that my daughter has friends that have experienced this. It's something we talk about in my home quite a bit because it is definitely out there. What is self-harm and how to identify it? Perfect. We're going to watch some amazing videos from a mental health professional that's going to talk to us about that. Understand the why and know how to help. I love this so much. And this is kind of the core of what we're going to discuss today, because it's really important for us to understand, like, why is this happening? I know that it can be scary. It can make us feel angry. It can make us feel frustrated. And so we're going to work through that today in this presentation. So a lot of what we learned tonight, we're going to learn from Jenna. And Jenna is incredible. She has this Move Toward organization that really helps parents connect with their kids. She's the clinical and founder of the Atlantic Center for Relational Healing. She teaches about trauma and addiction all over the country. She has a master's degree in public policy and in professional counseling. And she does a lot of the consulting for the Cook Center. She's one of our main mental health professional consultants. So she's going, throughout this presentation, we're going to see a lot of videos from Jenna. So we will start with her very first one, and we're going to listen as Jenna talks about this kind of concept of our core self and the parts within us, which will then help us understand why self-harming can become a thing for some of the people that we love.
Internal Family Systems, or IFS for short, is a model of understanding human behavior that was developed by Dr. Richard Schwartz about 40 years ago. And it simply suggests then, rather than us being one large monolithic creature, we're all, as human beings, comprised of a core self, who you and I authentically are, and many different parts. And it's actually the activity of our parts that gets in the way of our access to ourself that causes all of our struggling in life. The IFS model teaches us that rather than being one large monolithic entity, we are all comprised of a core self and many different parts. And our core self is really a deeply loving, grounded, connected, calm, courageous part of us. In fact, it's who you truly are and who I truly am. This incredible core is at the center of every human being. Incidentally, this is our authentic connection to the divine. But we don't all walk around feeling loving and compassionate and connected and curious and courageous most of the time. The reason why is because our parts get activated and obscure our access to our core self. Now, we're created with this basic self and many different parts, and those unburdened parts just make up our unique personalities. We all have parts of us that are unique to who we are. But when difficult things happen in life, which often happens to many of us at a pretty young age, our parts become burdened or covered over with the impact of that, what we would call in the clinical world, trauma. And they lose access to their innately positive qualities. So we develop parts of us that feel sad or depressed, parts that feel ashamed. If you really knew who I was, you wouldn't love me. Parts that feel ugly, or parts that feel like a lone wolf. I'm all alone and nobody's really here for me. Or parts that feel slow and stupid. These are the burdens that our exiled parts carry. And they're called exiles because all the rest of our parts want to try to exile them because we don't like the way those feelings feel. When our exiles are triggered, we lose access to our core self qualities and we get flooded by the emotions that they carry.
Okay, so I love that kind of description of what's going on inside of us and what's going on inside of our kids. I love the way Jenna talks about how trauma covering up our core self is really not a new concept, but the way she shows those different things that can help us lose access. It really causes us to lose access of who we really are. And it can cause us to do things and say things that aren't healthy, right? Such as self-harm. So what we're going to learn today is that self-harm is not always the same as suicide ideation. And then we're going to talk about signs that our child might be self-harming. We're going to talk about reasons why our children self-harm. And we're going to talk about what we can do to help a child that might be self-harming. And again, this can apply to anyone in our lives. So we'll go ahead and get started with this very first one. Self-harm is not always the same as suicide ideation. Some people think it's a form of suicide attempt, and that doesn't mean that it can't escalate to that. But it also can be a little bit different. And Jenna is going to share with us what that means and what the risk factors behind self-harm look like.
Hi parents, we've been getting a lot of questions recently about self-harm behavior in children. I wanted to take just a moment to address this important parental concern. It makes sense that we're getting a lot of inquiries because what we know is that at least 1 in 4 young women and 1 in 7 young men are dealing with self-harm as a way of trying to cope with negative emotions or low self-esteem or the pressures of the environment that our kids are facing. As parents, we can be on the lookout for risk factors. These are things like a history of trauma or an environment that is not safe in some way. If there's verbal, physical, sexual abuse in the home or in other environments, if there's bullying that's happening, if there's been a major breakup or a major loss, like not getting picked for the varsity team or getting a bad grade when the student is used to getting a good grade. anything like that, that for a child may feel devastating or hurtful. These are traumas or difficulties that children sometimes turn to self-harm to cope with. Really important for us as parents to know, however, is that self-harm is not the same thing as suicidal ideation, typically. They have a little bit of overlap, but they're two distinct areas. If you do discover that your child is self-harming, this does not necessarily mean that they want to die or that they are suicidal. What it probably means is that they are trying to cope, again, with overwhelming negative emotion or pressure or low self-esteem by cutting or self-harming in some other way.
Okay, so self-harm, again, probably means the majority of it means that they're trying to cope with overwhelming negative emotions. And she talked about those different experiences or triggers, and we don't always know why that is. And we know that different children respond differently, even to the same experience sometimes. So it's just important to know that we don't always know the why, we don't always know that beginning piece, but we're gonna start to help them deal with whatever those negative emotions are that they're experiencing. Well, we need to talk about the signs of self-harm. And in this next short segment, Jenna's gonna share some of these signs that as parents and caregivers, we can look for.
Things that we might notice or observe would be things like unusual scarring, especially on the inside of the forearm or the inside of the thighs. We might see burn marks, we might see unusual bruising or injuries and scabs that aren't healing. Typical would be a child who is wearing long sleeves or long pants in warm weather. In other words, their attire is warmer than would be indicated by the temperature, and not wanting others to see the skin, not wanting parents to see their skin in these areas where they could be self-harming. These are all indicators that something could be going on with self-harm. Students are exposed to this through social media, through their peer group. Some students and young adults try this more out of sort of social pressure, but most are really using this as an attempt, not a helpful one, but an attempt to cope when their natural coping skills are overwhelmed.
So let's take a minute and list some of the words that can be signs of self-harm. So, Jenna kind of started that list. What might some signs be? What are the whys that might lead a child to do this? I think it's important, again, to point out that a lot of kids might try it, right? They've seen it, they're curious about it. But the ones that continue to self-harm, the ones that get into that negative, unhealthy pattern, those are the ones that don't have the skills, or their other coping skills have been overwhelmed for some reason. A healthy person isn't going to continue to self-harm, right? It's painful. So that's important to understand. Some of the things that she mentioned were the signs that they might be cutting, isolation, burn marks, wearing long sleeve shirts to kind of hide. Most people are ashamed. Most people feel really ashamed that this is something they're doing, right? It's not healthy. And so they don't always want to share it with people. And then some of those whys are, again, being overwhelmed, not having the skills, having had some trauma, something painful that's happened to them. Okay, so again, self-harm may not equate to suicide ideation, but self-harm is definitely reflecting something that needs immediate attention. Everyone needs a way to cope with their emotions, and those who are self-harming are using it as a way to cope, to block or numb or to feel something. And again, that stigma, that shame, that embarrassment is going to make it really hard for them to seek the help that they need. So we'll go in a little bit more depth of the reasons why. what's going on in a child's mind, what might be the root of the issue, what might be triggers. Jenna's going to explain to us a little bit more about this.
Even though it may not make logical sense to us as adults, here's what's going on in a child's mind. I like to use some props to illustrate this. I want you to imagine with me that this is who your child is at their core. I do believe that this is true. Who your child authentically is a loving, grounded, solid, steady, courageous, clear-minded individual. This is who you and I are at our core as well. But life happens to all of us. We don't just walk around in this loving, calm, grounded, clear-minded place all the time. When that happens, we develop parts of us that feel negative feelings. For example, in a time of COVID or pandemic, many of us have parts, like this little piglet representing here, parts that feel anxious. When our anxious parts get triggered, they tend to take us over. We lose access to our core self. And we feel anxious and afraid and fearful. Our students and young people have a lot to feel anxious about. Not only are they trying to grow up and mature during pandemic and COVID and quarantine and online school, but so much of their lives have been disrupted, just like ours. They may have parts that feel very anxious. They probably, just like you and I do, have parts that feel sad. I have an Eeyore here figurine to represent sadness. We can feel sad or even depressed for a lot of reasons. You can't go to the gym. You can't see your friends. It's very socially isolating to be dealing with what we're dealing with in the world today. Many people are struggling with having parts that flood them that feel depressed or sad. In addition, kids are often dealing with online pressures and things like bullying and social media where they're feeling isolated or picked on or less than. So I've got a little skeleton guy here to represent that horrible feeling of shame, of brokenness, of not being wanted, not accepted. Gosh, when we get flooded with shame, these parts can just overwhelm us. For adults, coping with things like anxiety, depression, and shame is challenging enough. For young people, it can be even harder because they don't have a lot of the adult coping skills on board that we do. They may develop other parts to try to manage those feelings, things like people pleasing and trying to make everybody like them or be all things to all people so that they won't have to feel rejected or ashamed or bullied. They may have parts like this brain here that try to do everything perfectly and know it right and be a straight A student and make mom and dad proud so that they won't ever have to feel anxious or less than. They may have parts that are coping by eating sugar or cookies or binging and purging or restricting. We all have these food parts that try to jump in to help us manage our negative emotions. When a lot of those fail, we often find that our young people are turning to cutting. Even though this doesn't make sense to us oftentimes as adults, how can cutting ourselves help with feeling negative emotions? To our kids, it's one way of externally representing the yuckiness that they're feeling inside. Or if they're feeling completely numb and shut down, cutting is one way to at least feel something. What I want you to know, just like these other parts that we've talked about, is a cutting part is a part of your youngster that's trying to help them manage their shame, sadness, anxiety, these negative emotions, or manage the pressure that they're feeling.
Okay, I love the way that Jenna explains that. Self-harm really is one way that they are representing what they're feeling inside, without passing judgment or sounding shocked or being disgusted. It's really important for us to understand this why, and that this action that they're doing is just a small part of them. And it's coming from a place usually of some kind of pain that they're in. It's important that we have real conversations with our child. And this can be so hard because we're also now flooded, right? With fear and overwhelm and frustration. But we want to really approach this conversation with curiosity. Jenna says, I love her approaching them with curiosity, so that you can really have an open conversation about why this is happening. And then, of course, with concern. It's also important that we don't unload all of our negative emotions about this onto them, which I am the first to admit as a parent I have done, and it can be very hard not to do, right? But they're struggling with this pain, and then suddenly we've put all our frustration and pain and emotions onto them, and now they feel like they have to carry that too. And that spiral of shame and guilt and embarrassment just gets worse and worse and worse. So we want to take care of our own emotions and be in a space where we can really help our child. And we're going to kind of reinforce this message. Jenna is going to share with us in this final video one of the best things that parents can do to help a child that does self-harm.
Parents, here are a couple of really quick pointers on what we want to do. First of all, if you suspect or discover that your child is self-harming through cutting, burning, any of these ways, it is so important, first of all, to manage our own emotional reaction. For many parents, this is incredibly distressing. We may have a tendency to escalate ourselves emotionally. That's okay. We just don't want to do that with our child. We want to take our feelings to a safe friend or a trusted support or a therapist to help us process our fear, our shame, our anxiety that comes up when we know that our child is struggling. When we approach our child, we want to do it with all these parts in mind, rather than saying things like, what the heck is wrong with you? Why are you cutting yourself? That is gross. You need to stop, which is not helpful. That adds to our child's shame, which then escalates the need for cutting and hiding it. What we want to do is acknowledge, wow, sweetheart, I'm noticing that there's a lot going on right now that may be creating anxiety for you or sadness or shame. You're probably even dealing with some things I don't know about that may have come up on social media or at school. And I've noticed that you have had some scars on your arm that seem kind of unusual. I know that some young people turn to self-harm to try to manage pressure or depression or anxiety or shame. And I'm wondering, is it possible that that is something that you're trying to help manage those emotions? In other words, when you're asking your child about it, we don't want to be afraid to talk about it, but we want to speak about it in the right way, honoring that the cutting is not really the main thing. The main thing is whatever is causing the cutting. It may be that they're experiencing bullying, isolation, rejection, loss, anxiety, depression, fear, shame. Certainly, if there is abuse happening in their environment anywhere, in the home environment, if they're being screamed at, yelled at, called names, physically hit, sexually abused, these are the things that are driving the cutting, and those things need to be addressed first. As parents, we want to approach cutting with curiosity. I'm wondering if this may be going on for you. It would make sense if you needed to try something like that to deal with all of the stressors or anxiety or the pressures of trying to do it perfectly and get straight A's while going to online school. It's really hard right now. A child may or may not be willing to share with a parent that that's going on. And that's okay, but we as parents can model that we are safe people to talk to when our child is struggling. If a child does admit, or we do find out that they're struggling, not only do we want to be a safe person in the way that we talk to them about it, but we want to do two other really important things. The first is connecting the child to some type of professional support. Connecting the child to some type of professional support. Ideally, not against their will, but helping to engage them in the process, because oftentimes an outside clinician who specializes in adolescence or pre-adolescence and self-harming behavior is going to be critical in working to bring about wellness and health for children. The second thing that we can do is try to engage our child in coming up with some alternate ways to accomplish what the cutting is trying to help them with that might be more effective, making a coping list with them. This could include everything from doing deep breathing to using one of the free meditation apps that helps significantly with anxiety and depression when used regularly. It might be beating a pillow and screaming into a pillow when the child is feeling rejected or angry. Getting out that anger and sadness is so important in a safe way. If crying is needed, trying to push back those tears is not helpful. We want to invite the tears to be there. Maybe we want to invite our child to draw a picture of what they're experiencing using all the different colors. Especially this is helpful with young children who may not be able to articulate what they're feeling, but who can draw what the feeling feels like. Maybe we might want to encourage an older child to write a letter. Let's say they've been bullied. Maybe they want to write a letter to the bully that will never be delivered, but they can get their feelings out on paper and have a voice and then destroy the letter. If we discover our child is being harmed in ways such as being bullied, we as parents want to let the child know that we want to be there to help and support them and connect with the school administrators if there's online bullying happening, or in some way helping our children to have boundaries of protection against whatever is occurring.
Okay, I just always love learning from Jenna. This quote is really difficult. It's easy to put up here. It's easy to say, manage your own emotions first. This is really hard. It might be one of the hardest things that we're asked to do as parents. But if we know that our children are self-harming, we want to stay calm. We want to approach the situation calmly. Getting a hold of our own emotions allows us to be there for them and to hold space for all the things they're going through and not put our big emotions, which we are feeling, onto them. Once we have ourselves in a calm and safe place, then we can have those curious conversations. Look for the things that are driving the self-harm. Asking questions, asking them direct questions. It does usually need some type of professional support, and that can be tricky and that can be expensive. But again, opening up that conversation is going to lower the shame. It's going to lower the embarrassment. It's going to start that road to healing. And in the meantime, just like Jenna said, we want to make a list of healthier coping skills. What can they be doing to deal with these emotions in a healthier way? So here's a quick list. It's nice to read about. We want to love them, talk about it, validate what they're going through. I tell you what, I mean, I don't understand why someone would self-harm, but I can validate the pain that they're feeling. I can validate that they're scared and ashamed. Again, make that plan, seek professional help. So here's a great list. If you're on your Mentimeter, if you're on the Mentimeter, you can click if you have something that you think might work the best for you or your child, right? We need these healthy coping skills as well as adults. Sometimes we need to be distracted in a soothing and calming way. Pets are great for that. Going for a walk is one of my go-tos. If I'm upset, if I'm feeling overwhelmed by emotions, if I'm in a lot of pain, going for a walk helps me work through those in a better way. Creating something, again, that coloring or drawing releases some really great chemicals to help combat some of those overwhelm. And then sometimes we need help releasing emotions. I love when Jenna talks about we need to encourage crying and feeling. Clutching ice until it melts is a good one. Using a punching bag, creating or listening to loud music, maybe sad music, like really allowing those emotions to move through our children and teaching them that it's okay and not having to shove them deep down is really important. So here are some things that we've learned, right? Handle our own emotions first. Self-harm does not always mean they're having thoughts of suicide, but that's definitely a question that we want to ask. Hey, I understand this is happening. I'm so sorry. Are you having thoughts of suicide? And if that is accompanying self-harm, that's important information for us to know so we can get help for that as well. Watch for the signs, ask, and try to understand the why. Just be curious. I love that phrase, be curious. Make a list of alternatives with your child and then work on that getting professional help piece, which can be difficult. And then Jen is going to share one more little phrase, one more little video with us to help better understand the why.
First of all, to help you understand, if your child is dealing with self-harm, you are not alone. Our kids are under a lot of pressure, just like we all are, and their coping skills are more limited. So understand the cutting is a problem, but it is not the main problem. The cutting is a reflection of something that needs our attention more urgently. When the bigger issue is addressed, hopefully the cutting behavior can step back. We want to become curious when we ask them about it and when we're present with them in a really emotionally safe way. We want to help our kids name and feel their feelings: anxiety, depression, sadness, fear, shame, panic. All of these things are valid and all of these things matter. We want to help them name them and give voice to them. If they are coping in unhelpful ways, like through self-harm, helping them to brainstorm with you other ways that they can cope when they get flooded with anxious parts or depressed parts or ashamed parts. We as parents can be an incredibly supportive resource to our kids when they're struggling with self-harm. Self-harm is not something that kids who are really engaged in it can just stop doing. We need to understand and keep our expectations realistic as parents. We're going to need to help our kids if they've really been in a pattern with self-harming to get with a professional who can help them and not expect that just telling them to stop is going to be effective. We need to really understand what's going on underneath it and be there to help our children. Parents, when we have all of the natural feelings, I want to reiterate, getting our own help and our own support from other adults is critical. We don't want our children's anxiety, depression, and shame to be magnified by worrying about caretaking our emotions. We want to get our support elsewhere, like here at Parent Guidance and through therapists and friends so that we can be there present and steady as a support for our children when they need us most. Thanks, parents. You're doing a great job and we are here to help.
Okay, so one thing that it's also important to understand, the reality is self-harm is often reported by text by kids who are 13 years or even younger from the crisis text line, right? 988 is the new suicide prevention hotline. There's also a crisis text line connected with that. And it's okay to know this number, to reach out for help. So you can text hello to 741-741 and then speak anonymously with a crisis counselor. That's something we can teach our kids to do. It's something we can do with our kids. I always encourage parents, if you're not sure what to do this with your child. Like, hey, let's connect with a professional right now over the phone. Let's text this number, ask them what some good next steps are, and really help our kids feel comfortable with asking for help. And that it's okay that we don't know all the answers as parents, because we don't, and that's okay. Okay, we're gonna wrap up here pretty quickly, but I just wanted to ask if there were anything that really stood out to you. If there's anything that you'll really remember from this conversation. We love to find out what is the most impactful as we continue to grow and change and make sure this presentation is effective for the needs of the audience that's watching. So if you'll think about that for a minute and put that up there or even write it down for yourself. My favorite reminder is always, always, always the reminder to manage my own emotions first, to not make my child feel like they have to do it for me, right? Which is, it's tough, you guys. It just really is tough. So we want to communicate with our child. We want to ask direct questions. We want to be curious. We want to validate their emotions, and then we want to help educate. And that's not only educating our children, it's educating ourselves. And maybe we do that together as a team. I love thinking of it as, it's me and my child against this problem. It's not me versus my child. We're going to tackle this problem together, and we're going to learn more, and we're going to work on it as a team. And that's a really great way to approach something as serious as self-harm. If you need more help, there are so many more resources on parentguidance.org. I know this isn't the first webinar for a lot of people in this space, but if you go to parentguidance.org, there's this class, this webinar that we looked over tonight. You can watch that with Jenna. You can watch all of her Move Towards series, ways to better communicate with our kids, ways to help improve their self-esteem. There's a class on what if my child is being bullied, right? You can find a lot more specific information to your family situation if you need it over there on parentguidance.org. So I really recommend you go and set up a login. It's totally free. Creating a login just allows you to kind of track what you've watched and how far you are on the different webinars on there. And then if you're interested, the very next mental health series is going to be focusing on substance abuse here with the Cook Center. So they're going to offer this webinar on April 27th. I know that you guys don't register, but if you want to take a screenshot of this, I'm sure it will go out in an email. You can join this webinar and learn a lot more about substance use, which again, those coping skills can be a little bit connected to whether or not our kids are self-harming. So all of these things kind of go together. I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for letting me be here. Thank you for participating in this discussion. It is a really important one because our kids are struggling with things, and I really do believe that we're all going to be in a position where we can help a youth that might be self-harming find the help that they need. So I really appreciate you. I hope you all have a really great night, and I'll turn the time over back to Tina to say goodbye if you need to say anything, or I can end it here. And
I will go ahead and close us out if there aren't any questions. So I want us to check the Q&A first before you close out to see if anybody has any questions for you. That is okay. So is there a parent or child support group for self-harm?
okay, that's a good question. So the Cook Center has various coaching abilities, but I do know that NAMI, so the National Alliance for Mental Illness, if you go to their website, they have a lot of really amazing support groups, and they're free. They're online. There's support groups for parents who are supporting kids who are struggling with any sort of mental illness or unhealthy behavior, such as self-harm. And then there's support groups for teens and for children who might be struggling. And in a lot of cases, once kids are self-harming, they are dealing with some sort of anxiety and depression or something that they're not able to cope with. So I would really recommend you go look at it's NAMI.org, NAMI.org. Some really amazing free support groups with some really amazing free and trained people that run those groups, and totally accessible because it's all online, which I really love too. I've been a part of a few of those and help parents connect with those, and they can be so helpful.
Thank you for answering that. Let's see if anyone else has any questions before we close out for the evening. We'll give it just a few seconds to
It's great.
to see if anybody else is typing that we can't see. And I think I would say I'm just like you. I would have to work on my own emotions first, because I would probably be like, if you don't stop, because it's just like, and why are you taking me through this? Like, so I definitely fall in the category with you.
I think that makes you human. So I think that's okay. We still get to be human as parents, but
Yes.
just being aware of that and knowing that we have some of our own work to do is helpful. And I
Absolutely.
tell people all the time, the difference between a good parent and a bad one is usually like 50% of apologies, because we can apologize and start over and admit that we don't always react well because we love our kids so much.
Right, right.
And that's okay for us to admit to them. So
Absolutely. I agree with that. So I think we are all set. So I'll go ahead and close us out for this evening. So I just want to thank everyone again for joining us on tonight's Zoom. We appreciate your participation each week, and you can connect with us if you're available for more informative presentations and discussions. Once again, I am Tina Foston Hayes, the Parent Academy Specialist for the Educational Equity and Outreach for the Alachua County Public Schools. And hopefully we will see you all back here next Thursday when we will have some healthy eating tips and tools from our partners over at the University of Florida, UF-IFAS. And so without keeping you all any longer, enjoy your evening and thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on and hosting for us.